and sounds of the Nigerian stories. My Nigerian Folktales.
A very long time ago, in the ancient town of Ilorin, there lived a man whose name was Afonja. He wasn't just any man, for he was the military general of the Oyo Empire, better addressed as the Alaafin Aole of the Yorubas. But who exactly was Afonja? A traitor or a loyalist? A villain or a hero? Perhaps you may decide for yourself by the end of this story. Now, there's no way one would tell this story without the mention of a man by the name Ilorin, who happens to be the great-grandfather of Afonja and the founder of the Ilorin town. Once upon a time, there was a forest where only brave hunters went hunting. Many never came back alive, while others returned somehow maimed. But there was one man who had a unique way of hunting in this forest. He would usually use magical potions to transform himself into an elephant, hence living up to the meaning of his name, Ilorin. He soon built a hut in this forest and settled there. Whenever hunters came around this hut to rest, they also seized the opportunity to sharpen their metallic weapons that was made of iron, known as Ilorin in the Yoruba language. So, Ilorin meaning iron, Ilorin meaning the act of sharpening an iron. You get it? This was how the name of the place Ilorin came to be, and Ilorin, the great-grandfather of Afonja, became its first village head. Over time, more and more people came to settle down in this forest so that it soon grew into a town. It is important to note that during this period, the Oyo Empire was very powerful as it was one of the biggest dealers in slave trade and as such had expanded its territory as far as major parts of the southwest and some parts towards the northeast. At that time, Oyo was the capital, and there was a council of chiefs known as the Oyomesi, whose primary purpose was to check and balance the power of the ruler, the Alaafin of the Oyo kingdom. The Oyomesi, headed by the Basharun, was a powerful group that consisted of the Basharun, the Agbakin, the Samu, the Alakmeni, the Laguna, the Akiniku, and the Ashikpa. And although the Alaafin Aole was equally powerful, as he answers to no one except the king, he was not a member of the Oyomesi. However, the 6th Alaafin Aole headed the Ilorin town as it became a military outpost for the old Oyo territory. Igba funfun lórí omi, Igba funfun lórí omi o, ẹni bá mọ̀wẹ̀ kó ká lọ. Igba funfun lórí omi, Igba funfun lórí omi o, ẹni bá mọ̀wẹ̀ kó ká lọ. Ẹ ṣe ire kó dára, ẹ ṣe ire kó dára o, ẹni ayé kan, ẹ ṣe ire kó dára, ẹ ṣe ire kó dára o, ẹni ayé kan, ẹ ṣe ire. In the olden days, when a child is born, the parents will take their child to a priest to find out what will become of him or her in future. This used to be a custom in those days known as Akosejaye, more like a horoscope. Therefore, when Alugbe and his wife had their son, Afonja, they went to consult the oracle to find out his Akosejayi.
Àrọ́bá ní bàbá ìtàn.
Ladirin begat Pasin. Pasin begat Alugbe. And now, Alugbe is the father of Afonja.
The priest began to tell them,
This child is going to be great. Very great, in fact. He's going to be a force to reckon with in the entire kingdom. But he must beware, for a time shall come when there shall be a test of his character. He must heed serious warnings in order to avert his downfall and prevent his people from becoming slaves.
the priest concluded. Bearing what the priest had told them in mind, Afonja's parents did their best in raising him with good values. He grew up becoming quite skilled in hunting because he had started following his father to hunt from a very tender age. He was also good at wrestling, for his favorite sport was gidigbo. Soon, he became popular in his town because he was the champion of most of the wrestling bouts he engaged in. So Afonja would go for many wrestling competitions in different towns in the kingdom that his fame went far and wide. Before long, Afonja enlisted in Oyo's military arm that was at that time headed by Kakanfo Oko of Jabata. He went for wars and fought gallantly like a brave soldier, and subsequently he became a very powerful warrior whose fame got the attention of Alaafin Aole, the ruler of Oyo at the time.
Kakanfo Oko told me of how you had his back on the battlefield some days ago.
The king addressed Afonja.
Kábíyèsí Aláṣẹ Ìkejì Òrìṣà. It's the doing of the gods.
Afonja replied.
He has told me a lot about you, and I think I like you. Thank you, Your Royal Majesty.
The king continued to say.
I like your spirit, young man. Thank you, Kábíyèsí.
From that day on, Afonja visited the palace anytime he went to Oyo. In fact, he became a good and close friend of the king that it seemed as though he literally lived in the palace. Even rumor mongers speculated that Afonja might be elected by the Oyomesis and the Ogbonis to become the next in line of the Oyo dynasty.
Bọ́mọdé ò bá tàn, á bá àrọ́bá.
He continued to gain recognition by virtue of the wrestling competitions he went for. After all, it was what made him popular in the first place. It was on one of his visits to Oyo that he noticed a young man about the same age as him was being hailed by some youths.
Amaba! Shaki! Obalola!
This man beamed, his face all smiles as he acknowledged their salutations.
Who is that?
Afonja asked.
That should be Aole.
Replied one of his friends.
And from what I've heard, he is from one of the royal families entitled to the throne of this Oyo kingdom.
Now, at that time, there was a damsel from one of the villages in Oyo who was very popular because of her beauty. She was the most beautiful girl and well-mannered despite the fact that she came from a wealthy family. A lot of men wished they could woo her, but they dare not, for they somehow knew she was beyond their reach. Aole, however, didn't have such limitations that would prevent him, so he accosted her a number of times, but she rejected his advances.
You belong to the class of royals like me.
Aole would say to her,
If you marry me, you will become an Olori one day.
I'm sorry, but I can't and I won't marry you, she would often reply.
Why is that?
I've heard a lot about you, Aole. You who could sell one of your very own friends into slavery. It says a lot about you.
But he spoke out of line, okay, and got me angry. I had to do what I did so he could learn his place. Abi?
That shows how mean you can be. Who knows? You might do same to me if or when I fall out of favor with you. That's the reason I can't marry you, Aole. Why Awe Siwaju? She retorted. Aole was to discover some months later that the woman he had his eyes on had agreed to become the wife of Afonja. This was a hard blow to his ego. He felt badly hurt.
Who is this Afonja?
He inquired.
He is a powerful warrior and a wrestling champion who hails from Ilorin,
Was the response he got from someone around. And from that day, Aole resented Afonja. Some years later, Afonja rose to prominence as he was made the Are Onokankanfo after the death of his predecessor, Are Onokankanfo Oku of Jabata. Aole's resentment increased the more, for in his mind's eyes, Afonja had gained more respect and fame than him in the entire kingdom.
Look at him. He is now the Are Onokankanfo, and I'm just a prince.
Aole thought to himself one day. Then a wicked thought crept into his mind.
If only I could be the ruler already. And why can't I? My cousin is currently relaxed and weak after all. I can easily stab him to death in his sleep. No, that won't be necessary. Besides, that will be too tedious. Aha! I shall poison him instead.
Àrọ́bá ní bàbá ìtàn.
And so it was that some weeks later, the demise of Alaafin Abiodun was announced. Oh, the entire kingdom mourned their king's death, for he was a good king that ruled them for 19 years. We will surely miss him. About 3 months later, Aole was crowned the new Alaafin of the Oyo Empire. He ruled for 7 years. During Aole's reign, there were constant problems. People were seized and sent into slavery at the slightest offense. The poor groaned as Aole's reign was high-handed. Meanwhile, Afonja, as the generalissimo of the kingdom, continued to go for wars, winning more territories for Oyo. He gained so much importance that he was even more revered than the king himself. So one day, Aole thought to himself,
Can you imagine? In spite of being a king, I feel as though I'm not respected enough. Afonja. The way his praise is being sung, one could feel the admiration these people have for him in their hearts. With this trend, won't my case be like that of Ajaka and Shongo? Afonja, the battle line is now drawn between you and I. Kabiesio, you sent for me.
The palace guard interrupted his thoughts.
Yes, go and tell Kankan for Afonja that I order him to attack Akpum and bring me the head of his ballet. Tobalashe, Your Majesty.
It so happened that earlier on that day, Alaafin Aole had awoken from a terrible nightmare where he saw himself being beaten by the ballet of Akpum. And as he woke up, slowly, his mind flashed back to the incident that took place some years ago. He had sold his close friend into slavery because he offended him. Somehow, the ballet of Akpom got to know that an Oyo citizen had been sold, so he sent out and rescued him. Then when the Bale found out that it was a prince that had committed this error, he gave the order that Aole be thrashed 21 strokes of the king instead of the punishment of execution. It was from that day that Aole resented him. Afonja carried out the orders of the king and sacked the town of Apom. The Bale, who had foreseen what would happen since Aole became king, committed suicide. Nonetheless, his head was cut off and sent to Aole in order to appease him. Afonja was leaving Apom with his men when the king's messengers arrived. They saluted the military commander.
Greetings from our king. He instructed that we take you to the next town he wants you to conquer.
All right then. Onward, soldiers!
Afonja ordered. They were getting closer to the hills where the town was situated when Afonja realized that it was Iwerele, the same town Alaafin Aole had told him about in one of their discussions. The king had even made him take an oath never to attack his grandmother's hometown because a curse had been placed by Alaafin Ajagbo on anyone who dares to besiege or even attack Iwerele town. That person is doomed to die a horrible death. It was at this point that Afonja perceived that the king's intent was to kill him. He exclaimed, full of rage.
What have I done to deserve this?
Are, what is the matter, Are?
Ashadu!
Shouted Afonja at the palace guard who brought him to the place.
Karaoleo.
He replied, confused.
So the king wants me dead and you have joined in this conspiracy against me?
Ha! No! Why would I conspire against you, sire?
And in that instant, he ordered one of his men to eliminate Ashadu.
What do we do now, Are?
We go back to Oyo because I have a message for the king.
On getting to Oyoile, he liaised with the Oyomesi in calling for the rejection of the king. In those days, when a king is rejected, he is expected to commit suicide. Therefore, when the Bashorun gave Alaafin Aole an empty calabash, he knew his time as the king of Oyo was up. But before he committed the ritual of suicide, he placed a curse on the Yoruba race, saying they will never be united as they will be scattered forever. He was a cursing king, and in a way, the curse from the attempted attack on Iwerele, for whatever motive he had at first, seemed to have started its effects on him. For either he was killed by Afonja or he killed himself, his life was doomed to end shortly. After the death of Alaafin Aole, Kakanfo Afonja returned to his hometown, Ilorin. Still angered as he felt betrayed by the late king's disposition towards him, on getting home, he declared that Ilorin will no longer pledge allegiance to the Oyo Empire, and so he became the sole power in Ilorin and the first head of this town who didn't pay homage to Oyo's sovereignty. By this time, many of the Yorubas in Ilorin had started converting to Muslims. It is also important to note that at that time, there were other tribes that were settled in Ilorin apart from the Yorubas because of Ilorin's geographic location. For instance, there were the Hausas who were referred to as the Gambaris. There were settlers from Nupe who were referred to as the Tapas, and very few Fulanis who were referred to as the Jamas. Moreover, Afonja offered freedom to many Hausa slaves who escaped from their wicked masters in Oyo, and a lot of them voluntarily joined Afonja's army. Notwithstanding, Ilorin town was predominantly populated by the Yorubas. One day, one of Afonja's friends by the name Sholagberu introduced a Fulani Muslim cleric to Afonja, a man whose name was Alimi.
Having studied the kind of person you are, I know you'll need stronger men in your army.
Alimi informed Afonja, even as Sholagberu agreed with him. Although he's second in command, Ologolo warned him against it. Soon, more and more of Afonja's men were replaced with Alimi's men, who were all Muslim Fulanis. Indeed, when they went for wars, they came back victorious. Therefore, Afonja's fame continued to grow. Howbeit, he remained a pagan. He became so proud and intoxicated with power that he couldn't see the danger he was beginning to put his people in. He welcomed more Fulanis and their families. An idle mind, they say, is the devil's workshop, which was why at a time when Afonja didn't go to war, his Jamas became raiders, stealing people's properties and perpetuating all manner of evil to the people of Ilorin. And when he was informed of their acts, Afonja tried to caution the Jamas who now populated his army, but they had gone out of his control for two main reasons. First was that he remained a pagan and never converted into a Muslim, which made him fall out of favor with them. The second was language barrier. Besides these two reasons, there was a jihad from the north at that time, and Afonja soon realized that he had little or no control over his army.
I was seriously warned against replacing all my men a while ago. A stubborn fly. A stubborn fly. And now I am doomed at the hands of these Fulanis.
Afonja thought to himself. But sadly, it was already too late. He gathered what was left of his army and tried to fight off the Jamas, but he was defeated. However, before he was murdered, he succeeded in killing Alimi, the one he believed had betrayed him. Afonja was killed with arrows fired at him while he was standing on his feet. Moreover, before his last breath, he was heard saying that with his blood being shed on that day, he was cancelling the curse placed on the Yoruba race by Alaafin Aole. After Afonja was confirmed dead, Abdusalam, the son of Alimi, the Muslim Fulani cleric, declared himself the emir of Ilorin and pledged allegiance to the Sokoto Caliphate. This is why they have an emir as ruler in Ilorin till date. The end.
Àrọ́bá ní bàbá ìtàn. Bọ́mọdé ò bá tàn, á bá àrọ́bá.
Nigerian Folktales.